we got a little audition tip of the week, just a little teaser thing. Brandon and I both trained with Todoroff Conservatory. Brandon's a member of the weekly Zoom workshops every week for over a year. I was a member of those for over a year before joining their 8-month conservatory, which I just completed. And I'll be jumping back into their Saturday workshop. But Tom uses a system of got what he refers to, and Michael Shirtliff in the book Audition, which if you want to go get a book, if there's one audition Bible, it's this by Michael Shirtliff. And Michael Shirtliff was the casting director for Bob Fosse and
David Merritt
was a casting director on Broadway and Hollywood, cast all kinds of famous movies, discovered a bunch of famous people on Broadway, and has broken it down into what are called guideposts. So we often refer to those here in the studio. But the thing we wanted to talk about today is there's different ways to refer to it, but the moment before and the moment after, or the button, or as Tom often refers to it as first impressions and last looks. And what that comes down to psychologically is there's also a term called primacy effect and recency effect. And what that is we remember the first thing we see or hear, we remember the last thing we see or hear, and the middle is kind of the middle. It's kind of muddy. Like if you went to any performance or any speech, the opening move, the opening thing, the opening speech, always going to be indelible in your mind if it was done well. And same thing, the very last line, that mic drop moment, that last finishing move, if it was a wrestling match or something like that, or like a sports thing, it's like you're going to remember the walk-off homer and you're going to remember the lead-off homer, but you're not going to remember all the hits between the second and the eighth inning if it was a baseball game. Some of that stuff's going to be all muddy. So we always are trained and we always help actors here take extra care with nailing that first moment, the first beat, the moment before. I mean, obviously making sure, like, I would never submit an audition where I didn't nail and believe the first words out of my mouth. Like if I ever flubbed the first line, that's not a take that I'm going to be submitting. Even if I like things later on, I'd be like, I want to nail that opening, because you never know as a casting director, are they watching all the tapes? Like they might be, if they don't buy that first line out of your mouth, it sounds like it was disconnected and you weren't really like grounded, or you didn't really know what you were saying or why you were saying it or who you were saying it. Or if it was just awkward, that might be the end of your audition and they might not even watch the rest, even if you think you got some brilliant things that you did in the middle. And then same thing at the very end. If they get all the way in and then you botch the last ending, or if there was a key moment as it was scripted, some key realization or like an epiphany or a discovery or some big reaction at the end of the scene, or maybe it's something physical, something physically in the blocking that had to be done. If you don't nail that, then the last thing that they're going to remember is, oh, well, he didn't quite, it was all good, but then he kind of fucked up the end a little bit, or that was okay, but then I don't know about that last beat. So we want to talk about moment before and button, or first impressions, last look. So what do you want to start with?
Are there any, like, even before you say the first line, Lars, is there any moment befores that you particularly favor?
Well, I think the thing that you got to think about as well is, and we're reminded of this through Tom all the time, is your background speaks before you, your frame speaks before you, your wardrobe and your hair and your makeup and lighting, all of that speaks before you. So look at all of that stuff first, because if you're entering into a frame that's poorly lit and the backdrop is really distracting, or it's like your kitchen or your dirty laundry in the backdrop and it's crappy lighting, or the lighting's all blown out because you're using natural light, or there's a window behind you, or any of that stuff, nail all the technical stuff first. And then I think it's a combo of, is there some kind of secondary action? Like, what are you doing? Or is the scene started at a party? You're at a party, maybe you're dancing, or maybe you dance. You dance your way in. Yeah, hey, I'll be right there. And then you're into the scene. So it's finding some secondary action to ground you. Like we had one today where He was like a technician, so he was like fiddling with some wires and just actually doing some action there, and then looked up and delivered his first line. And then when in doubt, as Tom always says to us, when in doubt, just enter and speak your first line, or you can be there as well, but be creative with that. And I think the mistake that a lot of people make is thinking that what they're doing is a mistake, and just make a strong choice, make a creative choice. And I would say, like, add a little moment before, rather than worry that that's too much. Like, some people look at sides and they're like, this is where the start line is and this is where the end is, so I can't do anything before that and I can't do anything after. But what if they were just rolling and they didn't say cut at the end? Or what if they were just rolling at the beginning?
Well, even in Michael Shirtliff's book, he says that all great scenes start in the middle. Like, we don't want to get people into the scene, because then we're working to get them into the scene. We want to start hot and ready to go, so that they're just propelled into this world.
Right. Which also means, what was I going to say? Shoot, I had something there.
Have there been any favorite moment befores that you've seen in this room or in during a session, Lars?
I mean, I'm always a big fan of, if it's a group party or if it's like a dinner party scene, throw a little extra line in there, or just the tail end of a joke, like, oh yeah, you should see the other guy, and then into a line. Or if you're not the writer type, if you don't think you can come up with something that, I mean, I would always aim, if it's comedy, obviously, to get a laugh out of it. But even just a laugh, you're at a dinner party, instead of just starting there silently, it's just anyways. And then I know what I was going to say. The thing you don't want to see is, you never want to see an actor turn on camera. So you don't want to see me like, oh, I'm just here as an actor, and then now it's acting time and I have to be on. It's like, the scene is starting. Like, if they're seeing you, they're judging you, and you're already you are the character. So versus, like, whether it's an in-person audition or a self-tape, it's like, you don't want to be caught. It's a weird thing. You don't want to be caught not acting. You also don't want to be caught acting, but you just got to realize that they're seeing everything. So you got to be in the scene. I don't know if I'm making sense right now, but
yeah. One of my favorite moment befores that I've ever seen in this room, I'll come over here just a little bit, is someone just did that and turned into it. It was a cute little scene about putting his son to bed, and it worked so well. I've never seen anyone do that in this room before, and it was incredible. And it propelled us into the scene. It gave us this sweet little moment, because he gave like a shh, and then they had this quiet little scene, and it was a beautiful beginning, and I had never seen anyone do that before, and I think that's so well done. And and I agree 100% with the laughing. It is one of my favorite go-tos. I think just even laughing at the top of a scene, or somewhere in the scene as well, people laugh. If someone says something that's funny, laugh at it, because that makes it a human moment, that builds camaraderie. Laughing says so many things without saying a word. And I think that's what makes a great moment before, is that it says so much without saying a single word.
And the one of the best things about a moment before is, if it's yours and it's creative and it's unique, it's going to be something that no one else does often. And if all you're doing is the exact thing that it says, where on the script it says start and nothing else, you can guarantee that your audition is going to start exactly the same as 100 other people. And when you're attempting to stand out and be the one person out of 500 who is given the gig, it's likely that that's not going to be enough. You'll be great. He did a solid job. Let's put him in the top 10 pile. But nobody gives a fuck about number 2 through 10 when you don't book the role. And they also don't pay you anything unless you get your $50 for a callback. So, it's the other thing you can do is find if there is an entrance, like you can already start. You can start in frame and just turn into it if it's just simple like that. You can be sometimes it's
and also with entrances, maybe sometimes don't just enter just like standing. Maybe you come in and it's just ahead. You look in.
Yeah, there's interesting ways. Be creative.
Yeah.
And find different ways, different viewpoints. It's like if the scene started with you, say it was like middle of a fight scene and you just been knocked down and you were getting up, it could just be like you can enter, like there's nothing to say that you can enter any way you want, and everyone is thinking like, oh, like I am I allowed to do that? Like if you're ever asking you, am I allowed to do that? Then you're on the wrong track. It's like, yeah, you're a creative human being. Tell a story creatively, visually, with the words, with your wardrobe, with your lighting, with your backdrop, with your strong choices, with your physicality. And that might mean your entrances, your exits, your first line, making sure that first line read is there. Like you mentioned, you don't want to warm up throughout. It's like when you go see top singers in a musical, for example, or just straight up singers, if you fuck up the first note, everyone goes, ugh. You can't, there's no opportunity to be like, oh God, for the first line or two, the first verse of that, she was way off, but now she found it. Now she's in tune. Like that is unacceptable. Like you have to nail it from the first thing that happens. And if that's your first words, or if that's a silent on camera entrance, or it could just be you thinking about something and showing some thoughts. Like sometimes it's he's waiting nervously. Like how many scenes start with you waiting for someone else to show up, and then oh, there they are. And then in that case, I would make sure, like if you are waiting for someone, let's see the moment of you seeing them. Or the opposite is often you're entering looking for someone. So if you enter and then I just give the line right to you without ever, I need to show you, or I don't need to do anything, but it would be nice if we capture on camera the moment of you seeing that person and discovering them. So if you're coming to find someone at a party that you got a beef with, you can enter and just be like, hey, there you are. Or you can enter, oh, there you are, I see you. And then so that there's an actual moment of a discovery there. Just little things like that, like giving these little extra beats.
Because also that discovery of the person has a different relationship to it each time. Like if it's someone that you absolutely love and adore, like you're gonna come in and be like, oh, there you are. Oh my God, I'm so happy to see you. As opposed to someone that, as you just demonstrated, someone that you don't like, and you're about to get into a scuffle with them, and hey, there you are.
Right. But showing us, like letting the camera see those moments and see those beats rather than missing out on those. What else can we say about moment before? I think one thing that I got called out on a lot, which I think I've changed now, is entering too much in a flurry. If you camera doesn't really like fast movements, so if you come in too fast, like if I say I'm flustered guy, and if I walk in and I'm just like oh, it's like you never have any chance to see me, to get into relationship with me. Also remember that if you're framing, like I was in a wide when I was back here, but if I'm in a nice tight shot, I don't have all kinds of room for movement. It's like in a close up, you really got to be still. You're not moving around. So you got to give camera and the audience an opportunity to just drink you in and see you. Tom used to always call me out as like you enter like a whirling dervish, which is like an old like circus performer kind of thing, where I'd want to be coming in doing all these physical stuff, and it's like there might be a time for that in a scene, but at the beginning you need to establish a relationship with the audience, let them see you. He often says, love can't hit a moving target. So it's like point your heart and your heart, hips, and eyes at the thing, at the person, either your scene partner and or at the audience, so that they can drink you in. And when in doubt, start simple, if you're not sure about it. But I guess the lesson is don't overlook that, and always never overlook it. Like you'd never want to just do an audition and you didn't even think like, oh, how am I going to begin? And I think take it one step further, put a lot of time and energy and thought into that moment before and in the beginning beats, opening beats, because you don't get a second chance for a first impression. And the other thing I would say is, if you're submitting more than one take, do different things on both of these. If I'm ever submitting 2 takes, I'll often, the beginning and the ending in both takes will be different. If I'm improvising something, I'm not improvising the same thing twice, because that just is not improvisation.
Nope.
That's just me planning something and doing it the exact same twice. And there's no point in doing that. If it's something that is unscripted, there is no point in doing it twice. Do it once and then do something different, and then they're like, wow, this guy's got a million hilarious ideas. He nailed all the scripted things that we needed, followed the story, followed the script, honored the script. So it's not like you're sliding the writers. But if you add a little thing at the beginning, you add a little thing at the end, and it's different every time, then they're like, okay, this guy, like, we can just roll the camera, and this guy's bringing more to this than anyone else that we've seen. So yeah, mix it up and do different openings, different moment befores. No point repeating yourself twice. My least favorite direction on set is, yeah, let's do one more exactly like that one. I'm like, well, okay. But if we just got that one, why are we doing it exactly the same? It's like, we're going to use 2 of the exact same takes.
Well, as someone that has said that a bunch of times, sometimes it's like you're already in the world, you're already of the mindset where you need to be. Let's take it further if we can.
Right.
Like, you're already there. You're already
that's different than saying
moment.
Let's do it like that, but exactly the same. Because what you just said, let's take it further, which is not take it exactly the same. I'm just saying, why would you ever do anything exactly the same unless you knew that camera didn't get it or sound didn't get it? There was a camera issue. The focus puller didn't nail the focus,
and like that's also
and
something
that also happens.
Yeah, and like that's also something to wrap your head around, because like there's a lot of actors that show up on set and will start overthinking and being like, oh, they want me to do it exactly the same way. I don't know what that means anymore. Did I do it wrong? What happened? And sometimes it's not you. It is all the other things that go into getting this one shot. Like,
right,
as you said, the lighting, the sound, camera angles, everything.
Right. I mean, that example might just be a director wanting to be safe. That seemed like the one, but let's get one more just in case.
Yeah,
somebody didn't hit the record button.
That happens all the time. We need a safety.
Right. All right. Let's move on to the button or the end. What can we say about this? So let's talk about 2 things. One is ending it as it's scripted, and one is adding a button, which in terms of like comedy or sketch comedy is adding your, like, if they didn't say cut, what would your next line be? Especially if, as the scene is scripted, if your character doesn't get the last line, if it's appropriate, throw in the next line. Now, a couple things is it's got to make sense.
Yep.
My personal opinion, being a big fan of comedic work, is that something that gets a laugh is really never going to fail. Like, if casting and production laughs at it, as long as it makes sense, like not something totally nonsensical that is out of the world of the scene or breaking the scene or just not appropriate, that doesn't make sense. But if it's just the director didn't yell cut and you just said the next thing, in character in the scene and it made sense to drive it forward, what would that be? And if it gets a laugh, that's why I love comedy, is because comedy is undeniable. If you're in a room of people and you say something and they laugh, it means it's funny because they laughed. And if they didn't, it means it wasn't funny because they didn't laugh. And what that also means is, when they did laugh, they get that funny, fuzzy feeling. And it's very rare that someone's laughing at something you did. There's a difference between laughing at you and at your humor, I guess. But in the context of acting, if you say a line as an actor and production and or casting laughs at it, it's like, that's a pretty good indication that they like what you did because it had that reaction. So it's like, to me, there's nothing more scientific than, did it work or didn't it work with a button? Is, did it get a laugh? If it did, great, kudos to you. But it's got to make sense. And I think the same thing is, don't do the same. If you are improvising a little button, don't do the same thing twice. Like, there's no point in doing it 2 takes and you're like, hey, look at how creative I am with my improvising, and then you say the same thing twice. The other tip is, if you're wondering what to say, call back to something earlier in the scene. That's a very common stand-up comedy thing. So if earlier in the scene you were talking about how delicious this lasagna was, and then you get into a conversation about whatever the scene is about, and then go back to the lasagna at the beginning, or whatever happened at the beginning, you can go back to it at the end. Is one way to think. If you're like, oh, I never know what to say, just go back to something. How do you feel about what just happened? How do you feel about the character, your scene partner? We can also talk about leaving as well. I find way too many actors are excited to leave at the end of their audition, especially when it's scripted that they leave. And I don't know that you really ever need to. There might be a few times where, like, okay, the only thing that makes sense here, or if you see it as an opportunity, like the way in which you leave is a choice, and is a creative choice, and something that you can do per either physically or as a performer. But really, I think, question whether or not you leave in the scene. I think often stay in a nice close-up, have your last thoughts, whatever you're thinking about. You think about TV, if it's 2 people, usually it's a 2-person scene. They have an intense conversation, then one of them leaves, and then you hold on the other person, and they're thinking about what they're thinking about. Like, oh, what did he say? How do I feel about that? Like those last looks. And you want to get that shot. You want to be the one. You want to be the last shot of the scene. So just hold and have your thoughts, throw in a little button, have those last looks, give casting a nice look at you. And just remember, nobody ever got cast. There was never, I don't think, I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I would wager to guess that no one was ever cast. No one ever said these words when they were going to cast someone. Oh, fuck yeah. Did you see the way that guy left frame? That was really good. You see the way that guy left? Like, that's not, nobody gets cast for how they are not there. It's, you get cast for who you are, what you look like, what you do on camera, how you sound on camera, not how fast you got out of frame. So I just don't feel that that's a thing that you ever really need to think about. And you can give them that one last beat, that one last moment, that one last look at you. And remember, they're making the decision on you. So let them make the decision with you still in frame, rather than fade to black real quick,
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people do it way too quick. Like, they're just so anxious to get, I got to run out of frame here. It's like, well, no, you don't have to. I'm a big fan of false exits too.
Oh, really? I'm not a huge fan of false exits.
Yeah, I like it. I mean, it can either be mid-scene where you think your character is, the scene is done, and you go, and then there's something that brings you back, or just leaving. I mean, you could leave, it's comedic, leaving, and then, oh, one more thing. That's that works. That's what I mean by false exit is leaving and coming. I mean, really, it's
I
not a
mean,
false.
as long as you, and I mean, as long as you do it creatively, that's what matters. It's just not something I am a huge fan of personally. Like I just don't like it just because it feels very unnatural a lot of the times, and it doesn't sit well with me a lot of the time,
Right.
and
So in
that's
that
why I will do my best to eliminate it if I can.
case, then that's an execution. It's like, don't ever do it if you can't execute something that feels proper and feels natural. If you're
Yeah.
doing something, if the way you're delivering a line or the way you're doing something physically, if you're not buying it and you don't like it, then you need to change it. And that's part of what's specific to actors, and every scene and every audition is specific to you. So you got to find what works for you. If there's something that you don't like to do, then don't do it.
Yeah.
And I think that's a lot of all this. You could be listening to all this, and at the end of the day, it's your audition. So you could say, fuck what Lars says, fuck what Brandon says, fuck what casting says, fuck what production says. This is me, and this is how I'm going to do it, and you can take it or leave it. Now, I wouldn't say fuck production or fuck casting overtly, because that's a terrible way to make friends
Make
in
an
the
impression.
industry.
Yeah.
And I would never feel that way either. But it's like at a certain point in this life and career, you need to just trust yourself, trust your decisions, trust your creativity, trust your storytelling abilities, and just be unapologetic to the world and not really be worrying about, oh, what do they think? Do they like this? Do they not? Is this right? Is this wrong?
Yeah.
We were often taught the term, there's no right or wrong. There's only weak or strong. It's like in art, what's right or wrong? There isn't right or wrong, but there's things that don't make you feel anything. And there's things that make you feel a lot on a spectrum. Like they're very polarizing. Like people fucking hate them or people fucking love them. That's where you want to be. You don't really want to be the vanilla guy in the middle that people are like, oh, I don't even really remember anything about what he said. Technically, he was fine. He said all the words. I could see him, but it was not memorable. And yeah. So again, really, and look at those, and you think cinematically too. Like think about the movies and the scenes and the television shows that you love. Often it's the opening. Like go back and look at the opening shot of movies and the opening of every scene. Pay attention to this when you're watching TVN movies, and look at the openings of scenes. Like what is the actor doing in their moment before? What are the last looks cinematically? Like those are some of the most epic shots in movies. That last look that they get in that after that epic scene. So pay attention to those. And it's usually that's not usually the thing that did it. And you're like, wow, see how fast he ran off screen? Like nobody's getting booked that. It's the same thing as nobody gets, Tom always says no one gets cast by how good their left ear looks. So meaning all your eye lines should be tight, like within like 90 degrees to camera here. If I'm doing this, like, hey, I'll be with you in a minute. Like you're not seeing any me there. I think you need to see your eyes. So throw that over here. Oh, just 1 second. I'll be there in a minute. Sorry about that. That's my guy over there, just seeing your eyes. So a moment before, moment after, buttons, put a lot of thought to beginnings and endings. And what I love about acting stuff is it applies to life too. So you go to a dinner party, think about your entrance when you walk through the door, who you're going to be, who you're going to sound like, what's the smile on your face. Maybe you check yourself, make sure you don't got mustard stains all over you. Maybe you got a gift, you got some flowers, you got a bottle of wine. And when you leave, did you just sneak out with the old Irish goodbye? Did you say something stupid and everyone remembers you saying something stupid at the end? Or were you endearing and you said goodbye to everyone? You said to everyone that you love them and had great goodbyes, and people think like, oh man, when he walked in here, he changed the molecules in the room and changed the whole vibe of the party. And when he left, it also changed the whole vibe of the party. And we would like to have him back. And that's a good way to think of casting too. It's like you've been invited to a party and they're looking for someone who's a fun person to be at a party. And ideally that fun party ends up to be 6 weeks on a movie shoot or 6 months on a television shoot. But you want to be someone that they want to see more of. And those first impressions and those last looks are going to be the things psychologically that sticks into people's minds. It's not going to be the tiny beat in the middle of a 5-minute scene that they're like, oh yeah, he really nailed that part.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe, but if you nailed that and you fucked up the beginning and you fucked up the end, then you're probably never going to get the chance to showcase yourself. So just be really mindful of that in all of your life.